Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 170 of the Masterclass podcast. My name is Cam, and I'm joined, of course, by Dave Hogue. What's up, Dave?
Well, I have to say that tonight I am somewhat excited about what's going on in Cleveland, and that I'm a White Sox fan. And even with the shortened baseball season, it is 1-1 in the 10th inning between the White Sox and the Indians. So,
does this game have playoff implications?
The White Sox have clinched a playoff spot. But what they really want to do is they want to win the division and or have the best record or close to the best record in baseball. So,
what is their record?
Oh gosh, I don't know exactly what the record is. It's like 34 and.
Oh yikes! Okay, so yeah, it's a lot better.
So
than
the 60. So they're 34-20, and Minnesota's kind of a game. Well, they're a game and a half behind them, and they're chomping at their heels. So
the Twins, really?
Mm-hmm.
Man, I have not paid attention to baseball at all. Not that that's a
well.
surprise,
When you only play 60 games, it's kind of an odd year, right?
Right, but I would
I
would have guessed that it would have been Cleveland that they were chasing, not Minnesota.
Yeah. So
has Minnesota gotten good out of nowhere?
I think they've been quietly. Well, I don't know if quietly, but they've been rebuilding as well.
Yeah, but the last few years, the AL Central has been Cleveland's division to lose. So Minnesota's kind of been slumming it with the Tigers at the bottom in recent memory. So, yeah, baseball is kind of dead to me. So, but I'm happy for you, Dave. I'm happy for you.
So, yeah, it's fun when your team does well. And
you know who's not my team anymore, Dave?
The Tigers?
The Detroit Lions.
Oh, the Detroit Lions.
I have finally.
Are they 0-2?
I have finally. Oh, they are very much 0-2. I have finally removed them from my life. I just can't anymore. I just can't.
Mm-hmm.
I've been a fan since I can remember, and that's probably when I was 8 or 9, so 25, 26 years ago. I remember Scott Mitchell. I remember Herman Moore. I remember Barry Sanders. I remember Wayne Fontes, the coach. I remember Joey Harrington and John Kitna and Rod Marinelli and Steve Mariucci and Jim Swartz and Ndamukong Suh and all of the other people, Calvin Johnson. And I have come to the conclusion after their 9th and 10th double-digit leads within the last 12 months that they have. Last season and the first 2 games of this season, the Lions have had 10 double-digit leads.
Oh my gosh.
They have won. How many games do you think? Of those 10 games where they've had double-digit leads, how many of those 10 games do you think they've won?
Well, based on the way you say it, I'm going to say 4.
2.
2. Oh my gosh.
They are 2-7-1 in their last 10 games where they've had a double-digit lead.
That's rough.
They were up by 17 points in the fourth quarter in week 1 to the Chicago Bears. The Chicago Bears Bears scored 21 points in the fourth quarter to win. Yep. In Detroit. Fast forward to week 2. Lions go to Green Bay. They're up 14-3. They lost 42-21.
Ouch.
I'm done, Dave. I can't do it anymore. I've seen them single-handedly waste Barry Sanders' career, Calvin Johnson's career, and now Matthew Stafford's. Barry Sanders is a Hall of Famer. Calvin Johnson will be a Hall of Famer. Matthew Stafford should be one, but he has yet to win a playoff game. He has the most passing yards in the history of the NFL through 150 games as a starter. More than Tom Brady, more than Peyton Manning, more than Drew Brees, more than anyone in the history of football. He has more passing yards in the first 150 games as a starting quarterback. He has yet to win a playoff game.
Wow.
I think he's made the playoffs twice in his career. So, all that to say, go Seahawks. I'm done. I can't do it anymore. And with the Big Ten season starting in 4 weeks, I will have a real football team to root for.
They actually decided to play, huh?
They did. They start October, like the week before Halloween.
Oh, that's hilarious. So they gave in
23rd or 24th or whatever. Yeah, so they're delayed, but they're going to have an 8 or 9 week season, depending on if they have to delay any games. But yeah, so I'll have the University of Michigan to watch, and the Seattle Seahawks to watch. So there we go.
I can get on the Seahawks bandwagon.
Yeah,
I like the Seahawks.
As
I like
do I.
players. I like players on the Seahawks.
Yeah, and they just beat the Patriots by 5. They stuffed Cam Newton on the 1-yard line to end the game. I mean, like,
Yes.
man, while that probably isn't the Super Bowl this year, it's not far-fetched that it could be if a few things break a certain way. So it's kind of cool that we got to see that game, because we probably won't see that game in the Super Bowl, but heck of a football game, 35-30. Not a bad way to spend a Sunday evening.
Nope.
You know what's a good way to spend a Tuesday evening, Dave?
Podcasting
about the Bible. That's what
and
we call a
reading.
transition
Yes.
in the biz. A nice segue.
Excellent.
And I do believe, as of last episode, we have finished the first chapter of Hebrews. So I think we're just gonna, carry on.
We are.
As
Yes, chapter 2 of Hebrews.
Yes, the Bible does lay these things out in quite a nice order for us. So we shall continue in that order.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Would you care to do the honors?
Chapter 2?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay, so chapter 2 of Hebrews. Therefore, we must pay much closer attention to what we have heard, lest we drift away from it. For since the message declared by angels proved to be reliable, and every transgression or disobedience received a just retribution, how shall we escape if we neglect such a great salvation? If it was declared first by the Lord, and it was attested to by those who heard, while God also bore witness by signs and wonders and various miracles and by gifts of the Holy Spirit, distributed according to his will. For it was not to angels that God subjected the world to come, of which we are speaking. It has been testified somewhere. What is man that you are mindful of him, or the Son of Man that you care for him? You made him for a little while lower than the angels. You have crowned him with glory and honor, putting everything in subjection under his feet. Now in putting everything in subjection to him, he left nothing outside his control. At present, we do not yet see everything in subjection to him, but we see him who for a little while was made lower than the angels, namely Jesus, crowned with glory and honor because of the suffering of death, so that by the grace of God he might taste death for everyone.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that wasn't like a, ooh, my chicken was yummy. That was like, ooh, the Bible is good.
Yeah.
Testify, Dave.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I underlined part of verse 8, but I don't want to put the cart in front of the horse here. So I will be patient until we get towards the end. This first section, verses 1 through 4, it's a summation, right, of the entire first chapter, right? Here's God spoke in many ways and many times through these people, the prophets, but now he speaks through Jesus. Here's a bunch of Old Testament passages that relate to this. So, therefore, we must pay much closer attention to what we've heard, which is really like it's almost Pauline in the way that this is done, right? Here's my point. Here's a whole bunch of biblical text to back up the original point. So therefore, pay attention to what you've heard. Like he's building. It's almost like a legal case, right? Here's my thesis. Here are all of my proofs. Here's my summation that says pay attention to what you know, because what you know is pointing you at Jesus. You never knew it was, but if you pay attention to what it actually says and what it actually means, we're talking about Jesus here. And it's one of those things that like I've heard, tossed around a lot is like the Bible is consistently pointing to Jesus, whether it's the Old Testament or the New Testament. If you read it and you pay attention, it is pointing to Jesus. In the Old Testament, it is always pointing towards what Jesus is going to do on the cross. And in the New Testament, we're either recounting what led up to what Jesus did on the cross, or we're pointing back to what he did on the cross, and then the subsequent fallout for what he did. And it's just really interesting here that we must pay much closer attention to what we have heard, lest we drift away from it. And, I've said it dozens of times before, and I'll say it again. It's like, I appreciate the clarity. Right. Pay attention to what you've heard, and what you've heard is the Old Testament. Look at what the Old Testament says, study it, understand it, and realize what it's pointing towards and who it is pointing towards, and that is Jesus.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I love the clarity of thought and the pointedness of it. Like, get with the program, pay attention. This is what we're talking about. And I just, I don't like to play games, and apparently neither does Paul or whoever wrote Hebrews, which is why, I enjoy, or James for that matter, right? So the three books, the two previous and the one that we're currently working on, are all people that appreciate some clarity and some brevity in their writing, and I appreciate that. He goes on. Sorry, do you have anything else you want to add to that first part there? I just started reading again and realized I didn't give you a chance to share your thoughts, and I apologize.
So, I have not been able to substantiate this with any translation of the Bible, but I did find, so we've talked about him before, John Piper being somebody that we respect and that we listen to, or at least I know that is true for me. And one of the things that he points out in this, and again, I have not been able to substantiate this with the translation, but he takes that first verse where it says, "Therefore we must pay much closer attention to what we have heard," and says that it translates, "It is exceedingly necessary that we give heed to what we have heard." So I don't know what translation that is, but this is from John Piper, and it's from desiringgod.com or .org, desiringgod.org. But that just really, I guess, just hit home with me and just spoke to me that, there's a weightiness to, if I pay closer attention to, and I put it into the frame of, it is exceedingly necessary that we give heed to what we've heard. It's like you mentioned Hebrews 1. If you're a Christian, if you've read the Bible, if you're familiar with who Jesus is, and you read Hebrews 1, not a lot of new perspective there. It is earth-shattering in who God is and that he is God's son. But as Christians, we can kind of get into this place where that is not earth-shattering to us. We accept it, we believe it, and we move on. And this just spoke to me in terms of, it is exceedingly necessary. And I know for me personally, exactly just what I've been saying, it can be easy to become complacent in the idea of who Jesus is and what he did. And so this verse, or this first section of Hebrews, reminds me that I need to be paying closer attention to who Jesus is, and honestly, just considering who he is and what he did, and what he has made available to us. And so I don't want to belabor that point too terribly much, but just a reminder for myself, and I hope this rings true for others, of just don't forget how important Jesus is, what he did is, and particularly when we're kind of in this book of Hebrews, and it's this argument of to the Jews that, we're talking about the Messiah here, that for those of us who are Christian living 2,000 years later, that there is an importance of just remembering Jesus and the fact that he is the Son of God. And that should create awe in us. And if it doesn't, maybe we're at a place in our journey where we just need to pray to God, renew that awe for me, renew just the implication of understanding who Jesus is and what he did. And I'm just going to leave it at that. So those are my thoughts on that first verse.
I appreciate it. All right, so carrying on, it says, "For since the message declared by angels proved to be reliable, and every transgression or disobedience received a just retribution, how shall we escape if we neglect such great salvation?" And I didn't really kind of understand this at first until just now. I was like, oh, I think I get what the author's saying here. Like, if we ignore the salvation that is offered through Christ, what chance do we have? It says here, every transgression and disobedience received a just retribution. So if you ignore your salvation, you're screwed.
Mm-hmm.
Like, God does not let things fall through the cracks. So there is a lifeboat off of this Titanic. Its name is Jesus, and you better get on board. Otherwise, it's not going to go well. And I realize that's not often how we like to frame salvation, right?
Oh, no, not at all.
We like to be much more positive, but again, to the brevity and to the clarity and to the terseness here of the author, it's like, look, here's the deal. We have to pay close attention to what we've heard, because the message declared by the angels has proven to be reliable. So therefore, every transgression and disobedience that has happened has received a just retribution. How then shall we escape if we neglect such? Like, pay attention. The salvation is here. His name is Jesus. He's done the work. Pay attention to what's going on. And if you don't, well, guess what? Everything, every sin will be accounted for. And if you have not gotten in on the salvation through Jesus, sorry, bro, or sorry, whatever the female version of bro is, sis, gal, dudette, lady, I don't know. Bro is such a, what's the female version of bro, Dave? And don't say bra.
Sis.
Sis, I can't say that seriously. Anyways, it was declared at first by the Lord, and it was attested to us by those who heard, while God also bore witness by signs and wonders and various miracles and by gifts of the Holy Spirit distributed according to his will. So, this is the option. God has attested it many times in many ways. Jesus is the real deal. Pay attention to what you've heard. See Jesus in it. Get on board. Like, his conclusion after chapter 1 is Jesus is the answer. You know he's the answer. If you pay attention to what you've heard and what you've read, you know that Jesus is the answer. Let's focus on him, because the alternative is not good.
Right.
So
yeah, and I think that's exactly it, because the first chapter of Hebrews is establishing who Jesus is. And I think exactly what the words that you have said are what we're supposed to do. I think there's kind of a charge to us in terms of pay attention. And if you are not paying attention, then you are not doing what is required of you. And so, yeah, there's definitely this, to me, just an underlying of pay attention. And then the second piece is, don't take for granted your salvation. And I know I do it. And as I look around the world at those of us who consider ourselves Christians, I think we take for granted our salvation. And when you really, really think about what that means, that is a terrible place to be if we are taking for granted our salvation and we are not paying attention to Jesus.
Yeah, it says a lot about us, doesn't it?
Yep.
All right. So moving on to verse 5, it says, "Now it was not to angels that God subjected the world to come, of which we are speaking. It has been testified somewhere, what is man that you are mindful of him, or the son of man that you care for him? You made him for a little while lower than the angels. You have crowned him with glory and honor, putting everything in subjection under his feet." So here he's talking about Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And again, he's drawing a differentiation between Jesus and angels. It wasn't to angels that God subjected the world to come. It was to Jesus. So again, a differentiation of purpose and of power and of authority, right? Jesus or God put the world in subjection to Jesus, not to angels, because Jesus is more powerful in a higher place of different character, of different power. It says, "You have made him for a little while lower than the angels." So we see the differentiation, right? Jesus above the angels, and then for a little while, Jesus is made lower than the angels when he is fully God and fully man on earth. But just for a little while, it says, "You have crowned him with glory and honor, putting everything in subjection under his feet," which is an interesting juxtaposition, right? Jesus is above the angels. You have put the whole world in subjection to him. But then for a little while, we've flipped places, and Jesus is put below the angels because he, is living on earth as a man. And even though he's lower than the angels, it says that you have still crowned him with glory and honor, and you have still put everything in subjection under his feet. So even though that hierarchy is flipped for, 33 some odd years, in the grand scheme of eternity, or even in that moment, like we don't even need to obscure it with eternity, even though Jesus is lower than the angels when he is man, the world is still put in subjection under his feet, because while he is lower than angels, he still defeats death. He still defeats sin. He still defeats Satan, and God is victorious even while Jesus is made lower than the angels.
Mm-hmm.
Which is rather fascinating to me.
Mm-hmm.
That the author of Hebrews has made such a point through this first chapter and a half to differentiate and to show how Jesus is higher than, or better than, or more important, or more powerful, or more authoritative, or different in kind than the angels. And then, and by the way, for the very small time that he was below angels, God still made the world subject to him, even though he was lower than angels. And it's just like, okay, we get it, dude. Jesus is on a whole different level. Even when he's made lower, his power and his authority and his differentness in kind from angels is so obvious and so strong that even when he is made lesser than, he is still putting, as it says here, everything in subjection under his feet. And that's, I don't know how you read that. Like, I think you have two reactions. There's two reactions to that you can't really find a middle ground on. And I'm usually the guy that finds the middle ground. I like the middle ground because usually binary means you're blind to something, right? If you're on one side or the other, you're refusing to see common ground. But I think here it's like, okay, you can read this passage and you can either believe that Jesus is who the Bible says he is and that this is true, or you can read this and go, yeah, it's a bunch of poppycock. It doesn't make any sense. It's just an old tale. This is ludicrous. I don't know how you bridge that gap here.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of think that's the whole point that the author's trying to make through this whole thing, is if we really do believe what the Bible says, and if we really do believe that Jesus is of this different kind, right, is God, the whole argument, right, is that he's not man. He has existed forever. He's part of the Trinity. He was there when everything was made. He was there before things were made. And for this little while, even though he is God, even though he is divine, he was made lower than angels just for this little time. But even when he was made lower than angels, everything was subjected to him. And you either have to say yeah or no. There is no compromise here.
Mm-hmm.
And I really think the author is pushing us to that spot of what do you believe? I mean, he even starts it out, right? We must pay closer attention to what we've heard. Like, pay attention and make up your minds. Do you believe what I'm telling you about Jesus is true, or do you think it's ludicrous? And he's pushing us towards a decision point where it's a bottleneck in the writing. You have to decide, what do you believe is true about Jesus?
Mm-hmm.
And I love it.
Absolutely. So can I just share a tangent that doesn't have a lot to do with what we're talking about right now?
Absolutely. We love tangents here, Dave.
So I happened to read Judges 13 this week.
As you do.
And it is about the birth of Samson. And Samson's parents are told about Samson's birth by an angel. And it was kind of funny because we were talking about last week about how when people encounter an angel of the Lord, they kind of have these, they fall to the ground and all this kind of stuff. And they did not have that experience initially.
They made liars out of us.
But it was just, it just made me chuckle because, you talk about things and then you're reading the word and then it's kind of like you get this whole other different experience than what you kind of experience. And so, they have no idea that an angel of the Lord has even come to visit them, to the point where they are saying, "Hey, you need to stay for dinner. we need to make you dinner and
hey, you
and
like
hang out."
meatloaf? She makes a good one.
But then at the very end, or not at the end, but later on in the verse, they come to this realization, and Samson's dad's name is Manoah, and Manoah has this moment of, we shall surely die, for we have seen God. And then she kind of was like, well, if the Lord had meant to kill us, he would have accepted he wouldn't have accepted the burnt offering from us. But anyway, a complete tangent, but thinking back last week as I was reading through Judges 13, that they had a very different sort of encounter with the angel of the Lord than what we had spoken about previously. But then after the fact, after he's gone and they are no longer having contact with him, Manoah kind of has this moment of like, oh gosh, we're going to die. Like we've seen an angel of the Lord.
We screwed that up.
So, I find humor in the Bible and how God does things. And I don't know if he laughs at us or if he just shakes his head at us, but
probably a little bit of both.
Maybe a little bit of both. So,
well, and to that point, I think the rest of verse 8 speaks to that. It says, now in putting everything in subjection to him, he left nothing outside of his control. And this is the part that I underlined. At present, we do not yet see everything in subjection to him. Has there been a truer thing said in the year 2020? That at the present, we do not see everything under the subjection of Jesus?
Yeah.
And this is where God, I'm sure, laughs and also shakes his head and or fists in fury, right? Like we can be so smart and so clever and so, ingenious, and at the same time just be so dense.
Yeah.
And, those of us that profess faith in Christ and, as his followers, like we can do so much, good in quotes, and we can honor God in so many ways, and then we can just turn around and just say and do really, really stupid, dense stuff where God's like, oh man, like we were just going down the right path and now we're spending 40 years in the wilderness, guys, and none of your generation is going to see the promised land. Like we were doing so good. We got rid of the Egyptians. You were eating my manna. You were following my fire pillar and the smoke pillar. We were doing great. And then now we're just going to have to waste 40 years and wait for the next round. Like it's, at present, we do not yet see everything in subjection to him. And like, I might put that over my door when I go out into the world. I think I've said this before, you know, most good Christian homes have something in some Bible verse in the papyrus font over their back door or somewhere hanging on a wall. In my parents' house, it was a quote from The Godfather, "Leave the gun, take the cannoli," was what we had over our back door. And yes, my mother is 100% Scottish, not Sicilian. So, you know, the fact that it was a Godfather quote makes zero sense whatsoever. But she can cook like a Sicilian, so I'll take it. And I find this this part just so like at the same time encouraging as it is convicting. At present, we do not yet see everything in subjection to him. Like it's encouraging because that means there's room for growth. Like right now, we don't see everything in the world being subjected to Christ, meaning we don't see the world as a place where Christ has full dominion, which means there's room for my understanding of Jesus and my relationship with Jesus to grow so that I can grow into a place where I do see the world as a place where Jesus has full dominion. And even though the world may not act like it's under his dominion, doesn't mean that it's not.
Right. Yeah.
So that's like the encouraging part is like Jesus is in control. And this is all his dominion. And the Bible tells us when all things, you know, come together, the fullness of time has happened, and every knee shall bow, every tongue shall confess that Jesus is the Son of God, and all that will happen. Then everyone will go, this is his place. And yay or crap will happen, right? Like, you know, different reactions will be had based on where we stand on this. But so like the hope in this statement is that we are not where we're supposed to be yet, and that means there's a room for growth, and that means there's room for revelation, and that means there's room for God to do his thing, and for us to be like, oh, did you see that? God just did, like, you know, there's room for all of that. And that's the positive side of it. But the downside is we don't see the world in subjection to him. We often see the world as being subjected to us. And that means I think I have power in places where I don't. Or I think I have power in places where I do, and therefore I abuse it.
Yeah.
And so there's this like point and counterpoint here of like, I can read this passage and be really encouraged. And at the same point, I can read this passage and be like, oh, yikes. Like I really am seeing the world as what can I do to it to get the most out of it for myself? How can I be selfish? How can I gather power and influence and safety and comfort and do the things that I need to do to protect me and mine? Which doesn't jive with anything that we've just read.
No.
Because if I were to pay much closer attention to what I've heard from the Bible, I would realize that doing what I just said is not at all what Jesus has called me to do.
Mm-hmm.
He has not called me to protect what's mine or what could be for me or for those, and to protect myself. He's called me to love others like he has loved me.
Yep.
He has called me to be an ambassador for the kingdom, which means don't be selfish. It means to give, and it means to share, and it means to show mercy and grace and forgiveness, and to do all the things he's done for me for other people with no regard for what I get in return.
Yeah. Yep.
It's a very confounding little verse, Dave, and that's why I underlined it when you read it earlier. It's like something about the way you read it. I was like, oh, I did not. I honestly, had I just read that to myself, I don't think I would have been struck by it the way that I was. But it's always nice to hear someone else read it, because then, like, there's just something about hearing somebody else read the same thing
Right.
Because you just get to experience it in a different way. And when you read it, it just struck me in a way that it would not have, or had not up to that point struck me reading it myself. So I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, and just as you were talking, I think for me, I've just gotten to such a place where my comfort and my safety is so paramount in how I live my life. And it's really not even about having more or succeeding or being victorious, or like I really do just find myself sometimes just going, I want to be comfortable. I want to be safe. I don't want to be inconvenienced. And how much effort I put into that sometimes, or, and that's, I don't know, just as bad, worse, whatever, than, striving for things and all that.
Comfort has a way of begetting more comfort, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is funny. Like we will work harder for more comfort than we will work harder for more gain.
Yeah. I would say that's true of me.
It's a very interesting concept, right? Because by definition, comfort means not working hard. But we will work really hard to maintain our comfort more than we will work really hard to, I don't know, lose weight or get a new job or learn a new skill or something that could actually benefit us, right?
Right.
But I will run headlong into a door 35 times if it means I get to stay comfortable. But like I go to the gym once a week, now I'm good.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So last verse is, or for this episode anyways, is verse 9 of chapter 2. It says, "But we see him who for a little while was made lower than the angels, namely Jesus, crowned with glory and honor because of the suffering of death, so that by the grace of God he might taste death for everyone." And I'm going to be honest, I don't really think we need to expand on that verse, Dave. I think that one says it all for us. That even though he was made lower than the angels, he is crowned with glory and honor because of the suffering of death, so that by the grace of God he might taste death for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a good verse to just meditate on, think on, ponder upon.
While it is clear, and I think it makes the message is understandable, it is one of the hardest things for me to comprehend, and often think I don't think I'll have any concept of that until the next life, but I don't want to go too far into that. So
fair enough. All right, I think we have come to the end of this 170th episode, David.
I think we have.
All right, folks, thank you so much for your time and your willingness to let us be a part of your day today, whatever that day is. So if you want to take a peek at the show notes, you can do so in your podcast app of choice, or you can go to supermegacorp.net/masterclass/170. And there you will find links to the good stuff, as well as multiple ways to get in contact. You can email us. You can talk to us on Twitter. Dave's link will be there. I think my link is actually an Instagram link. I need to double check that. It's been a long time since I've done that. I just prefer Instagram over Twitter, but that's just me. Maybe it's a Twitter link. I don't know. Click on the thing that says Cam Brennan and find out where it takes you. So we've got email, social media. There's also a phone number on there if you want to call in and leave a voice message on my Google Voice number. And it could be a question, it could be a correction, it could be, hey, I had this thought. We would love to hear from you and play that on the show and respond to it. So be bold. Be the first one in a very long time to take advantage of that. The last 2 times have been my old boss and his wife doing prank calls. So the bar is set very low, folks. And guess what? We played both of them on the show because they were actually quite funny. The point is, the bar is low because we would just love to have some input from other folks that aren't Dave and I into the show and use that as an impetus for some conversation. So take advantage of that if you'd like. Otherwise, we will be back next time with episode 171, and I'm looking forward to it. Dave?
Yep. We'll talk to you next time. Yep.
Bye.
Bye.